HJC, and here with Ken Kuhler with Blackbaud. Happy to have our session today. It's kind of a wrap-up in our first series of webinars with NextGen, and I think it's on topics that we are all intrigued about: mobile fundraising, crowdfunding, and the next generation of Canadian giving. So let's just jump right in. I'm Mike Johnston from HJC, and love integrated fundraising, and that's really what we're trying to get at the heart of with the NextGen report. And Ken, you want to say a few quick words?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Kenneth Kuhler. I've been with Blackbaud now for about 11 years. I am the interactive strategy manager for everything online, and very excited to be here today and have a lot of deep-seated interest and experience working with Canadian organizations.
Fantastic. So let's just jump in, and this is a reminder. People have a chance to win a complimentary hour of consulting when they fill out this survey. Remember that we'll be sending out an email in the next day or two that will have this content. So anything you're writing down today, these are lateral thoughts, things that are appropriate about your organization. That's really what we want to concentrate on: takeaways, new ideas around mobile and crowdfunding. So you'll have this link again, and really it's getting feedback on making a session like this better for the future. So quick agenda, not too big, but excuse me, but important. So mobile, we'll cover maybe 15 minutes on what are some things we need to do related to NextGen and mobile fundraising. Next, we'll look quickly at crowdfunding. Why does it matter? What the heck is it as it relates to nonprofits and fundraising, because we hear so much. Then Ken will take over, really concentrate on key findings and real-world examples on social network fundraising, and really crowdfunding by another name, and then we'll wrap it up for some questions at the end. So let's jump right in on mobile. There was a time a few years ago, and some of you may remember, where mobile phones were big enough to break the window on a bus to get into it. Or now they're so darn tiny and powerful from Apple and Android-driven, Windows-driven mobiles that they are a completely deeper and more interactive platform, and we're going to get at the heart of that. So this is a reminder, I mean, your supporters and how this relates to the mobile platforms. They are on the go, right? So people want accessibility from this new channel. Giving is impulsive. When you can capture people in the moment on their phones, impulsivity is even more important, right? Supporters have a shorter attention span. So with mobile phones, that means even more impactful messaging and collateral. Social networks are deeply embedded inside the mobile experience. So how does that influence the way you think about the mobile phone? And last, I mean, people are more demanding. The commercial experience they're getting in their smartphones or mobile phones, they want to see more and more in the nonprofit sector, and that's the dynamic tension we're talking about here today. People want the same experience with a mobile phone that they're getting with a large commercial vendor. How do we cost affordably think about providing that impactful and immediate experience? But moving sideways, it's just not about the smartphone. It is about this multi-screen universe of laptops, desktops, tablets, and the mobile phone. So let's just kick things off with a quick quiz, two-part, and it comes from findings in the NextGen report. Write down on a piece of paper, really quickly, just Y, X, B for boomer, C for civic, right? 4 letters on one side. And then on the other side, you can see the percentage per capita who view, right, through their smartphone, nonprofit sites, either to give or to advocate or get information. So quickly, let's do it. You have 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's see how you did. Draw those lines across. 24% of Gen Y, right, are saying they are interacting with charities through their mobile phone. Boomers, 6%. Civics, 3%. Gen X, 19%. So really a cascading percentage that makes sense. I'm guessing that almost 100% of the people on the phone thought the younger you are, the higher per capita you're interacting with a nonprofit through your smartphone. Let's go to tablets. Slightly bigger screens, right? Slightly different experience, but selling like hotcakes last year and this year for Christmas, for example. So same thing, Y, X, B, and C on one side. Let's have some fun. Let's use your brains. Draw a line across, right? Write down the percentage per capita usage. People in that age subset using a tablet and viewing it to interact with your charity. I'll give you 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Gen Y, 18%. Boomers, 14. Civics, 19. Gen X, 25. So, did anyone think that people over 65, right, are using tablets more than the youngest age subset of donors? You might not have. But what this tells us is different screens, right, for different age subsets, and it influences how you're thinking about how people are looking and interacting with your website and mobile, digital, really digital collateral. This is simply replicating, right, the stats we were just looking at and adding desktop and laptop. You can see with laptops, right, higher per capita usage to interact with charities, with younger age subsets, cascading down. You can see a slightly up and down with desktops, with older age subset civics using desktops highest per capita to interact with charities. And then I drew circles on that surprising, right, difference and similarity around tablet and smartphone, but tablet. So tablets are the most up and down with desktops. Just trying to get you to think. So looking at the high percentage of younger age subsets and really the furious use and new usage for mobile, do you need the kind of, do I even need to care about smartphones that you can touch? I simply remind you with this graphic and the picture of Lazadarius and Balsillie that just a few years ago, BlackBerry said, nah, you know what, these funny little interactive touch phone, you know, you touch them, the iPhone, we're not going there. Boom. So we don't want you as a nonprofit to underestimate the importance of a rich digital environment in a smartphone, and we need to create stories and functionality and offers that are mobile responsive, or we'll end up like BlackBerry as fundraisers. So what happens if you don't go mobile? Here's a recent survey of mobile web users. It's the expectation that people expect websites to load quickly on their mobile phones as their desktops, and they will recommend an organization and its digital assets more if they are having a favorable mobile web browsing experience or mobile experience with apps. And you can see that on the page. And remember, this stuff will be sent to you. And just a reminder that, I mean, we want you to be change agents. We're going to send you this material so you can sit down with your colleagues, senior management, and bosses and or board of directors and get them on the same page around investing and doing a better job with mobile and crowdfunding. If you do it right with mobile responsiveness and mobile ability, then it's commonsensical that people, right, it generates more traffic, people are happier, people do more things. So if that's true, right, that mobile is becoming increasingly important, with younger age subsets especially, right? And they expect this, then what are some simple best practices? Keep it quick. Simplify the navigation. Be thumb friendly. I think technology is changing the way we've evolved as Homo sapiens and the use of our thumbs. We just have to remember that. And design for visibility. I like visual things, and that's what we're talking about with mobile. Tactile, visual. Here's the Hitchhiker's Guide to Mobile Design. Know your sweet spots, right? Know the space. Remember that the majority of people are right-handed when we design, right? So easily within thumb's reach, right? Stretch to get the thumb here, you can see on the screen, and then the awkward bits. So it's a completely different way of looking at communicating material. Suddenly our hands are like in direct mail, right? This is kind of a throwback that with direct mail, people are holding and feeling and pointing and following. Now we're coming back to that in a new channel. Does it even matter? Your fundraisers. So fundraisers are numbers driven. This is a client of HJC and Blackbaud's, the Humane Society of San Diego. A tribute donation form and a general donation form, and the completion rate difference by making it mobile responsive and mobile effective from 18%, right, to 45%, 10%, 37%, 4 to 28. So on tablet or mobile or desktop, mobile responsiveness creating a better completion rate. So let's look at a Canadian example. This is Next Gen Canada. So let's dig into the BC Cancer Foundation and some testing that we've done. It's a client of both ours and Blackbaud's as well. So BC Cancer Foundation saw an increasing number of individuals through survey and through statistics to show that more and more people were interacting with their forms through a mobile device. So they wanted to go and look at the weaknesses of their donation forms currently that are not mobile responsive, and then the improvements that would happen thereof. So you can see here that the drop-down menus are hard to use on a phone for the pre-mobile responsive BC Cancer forms. There was the need to pinch zoom to see the whole form, and you know what I'm talking about with your thumb and your forefinger, pinching bigger, smaller. Oh my God, this is difficult. So getting mobile responsiveness to begin to play a better role and lead to less problems with the form. Small radio buttons, hard to click on a touch screen. I think everybody is giggling online knowing the experience of trying to, and you're pinch zooming to get bigger, and then you're missing, and then you're hitting the wrong one. So these are simple tactile problems that responsive design can begin to solve. And then distracting nav bars at the bottom, how they're rendering improperly in the past. So BC Cancer working with us, creating these more effective forms that are responsive, so they are dedicated response forms. What happened? I'm not putting that number there to make you laugh. The increase in conversion was 978% increase. It's commonsensical. The problems we just looked at are beginning to be solved when you create forms that are customer-focused and device-focused. And the Next Gen report is reminding us that we need to do the mobile responsiveness knowing that all age subsets, but especially younger age subsets, are increasingly crowding into the mobile space as their primary way to interact and give. And one nice thing you might want to do is to go to your donor base and do a survey on ways that you can improve communications. This is from the Humane Society International. And when we asked them in a survey, what are ways we can improve communication, the third most important piece was make sure I can read emails and take action from my mobile device. So I think if you need to build the case internally beyond the stuff that we're showing you here, then sending out a survey that asks mobile-related questions will find self-evident material that you can take to senior management or decision makers to get more investment for responsive design. Oh boy, what about crowdfunding? I cannot get away from hearing about crowdfunding, and so when I hear about it, and I hear about it incessantly, it makes me want to take a step back. And it makes me take a step back and say, what are the things that make up crowdfunding? And people type in extra things I've missed here. Please interact. It's made up of lots of small donations for the most part, right? So lots and lots of donations in a campaign that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, start date and an end date to create urgency and a campaign urgency. There are rewards that you get for different gift levels, and there's often a collective goal that you're trying to reach related and accumulating and aggregating the small donations. Okay? Am I missing anything? People can just type in if I'm missing, but I think those are the most important pieces. Now, for those of us in Canada and from Toronto, Rob Ford is a lovely cultural reminder about crowdfunding, that when there was word from Gawker that there was a crack cocaine use video, and they needed $200,000 to get it. There was a beginning, middle, and an end. There were lots of small donations. There were rewards. Look at the perks on the right. The Little Book of Rob Ford, a donation of a gift of $10,000 would get you the actual iPhone that recorded the video. When I think about rewards, small gifts in a campaign with an aggregate, right, a goal in mind, and a beginning, middle, and end, we already do this. It's called social network fundraising, right, or peer-to-peer fundraising, and there are clearly additions in crowdfunding, but the underlying foundation is exactly the same. Crowdfunding as a word is a reminder that every generation takes what's already come before and sometimes renames it to have ownership over it. I think it's a human principle at work here. And so for Gen X and especially Gen Y, they are redefining what we're already doing, peer-to-peer fundraising, social network fundraising, and they're calling it crowdfunding. Now it's clear Kickstarter, Indiegogo, portals that have non-charitable crowdfunding opportunities are new to the market for the last number of years. But charitable crowdfunding has been going on for a long time. And so this is simply a reminder of that fact. When we look at crowdfunding kind of crashing into social network fundraising and crashing into symbolic giving, then you end up with something like this from Sunnybrook Hospital and their Heal Now campaign, where you see on the left-hand side smaller, right, philanthropic items to be philanthropically purchased. And on the right-hand side, you can see major gift items like a helipad with a collective goal, people who can make small or big donations to reach that amount. Rob Ford, $200,000 to get a crack cocaine video, $8 million, $8.7 million to get a helipad for better emergency care at Sunnybrook. Many of the same underlying principles. The most important thing, I think, is how do we more effectively show charitable crowdfunding to attract more Gen X and Gen Y. And so why would that be important? When we look at next-gen findings, we look at this study of Next-Gen Canada. Have you donated through crowdfunding already? And for Canadian donors who are Gen Y, we can see 12% have done it already, right? A certain percentage, right? Say 43% likely to do it in the future. So huge future potential for crowdfunding for Gen Y, and that's when we go back and look at Sunnybrook, why it's important to get that right. 24%, right, of Gen X in the future, then descending to 13 and 6. So the big plays with Gen Y and Gen X, but I think we've already been doing this. We need to do just a sharper job with crowdfunding moving forward. Now, if we look at text to donate versus crowdfunding, right? So will you text to give in the future versus crowdfunding? It shows that I think text to give is died before it even arrived. That a much smaller percentage say they will do it in the future. A small percentage do it now, but crowdfunding is something that seems much, much more attractive to Gen X and Gen Y. So I'm going to hand it over in a minute or two to Ken, but just one last look at all the crowdfunding site opportunities in a commercial sense. And some fundraising. So this is from the Next Gen study, and we asked, what sites are you using now for crowdfunding? And you can see Kickstarter and Indiegogo are the primary experiences for all age subsets, but especially younger. So Kickstarter, 63% of Gen Y. My takeaway for you would be, go use Kickstarter, right? Get involved. Map out the business rules and the customer experience, and make sure that you laterally map that kind of experience into your charitable crowdfunding, because that's where younger age subsets are going now in Canada. And remember, this is a study of Gen Y, Gen X, boomers, and matures who indicate they're donors already. So Gen Y donors are using Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Go use it, get to know it, and then map the best practices over to fundraising crowdfunding. So because we already do crowdfunding, I wanted to make sure that Ken Kuhler had a chance to talk about these key findings and strategy opportunities for social network fundraising, because fundamentally that's what crowdfunding is. And so with that, I will happily hand it over to Ken.
Thanks, Mike, and I couldn't agree with you more. Text to give is kind of a foreseen thought these days. I think peer-to-peer is a great tactic, or crowdfunding for that matter, to inquire, empower, and really leverage your own constituents, right? You know, those were some very interesting data points that Mike provided that can help us use to drive fundraising success. Because at the end of the day, self-interest really drives fundraising success. And constituents these days, they want to define how they engage with your organization. They want to feel empowered to engage with your organization on their terms and within their networks. And nobody's more tapped into your mission than your own supporters, which makes them a wonderful asset to your organization. The more places you can touch a donor, the more success you will have. And I can think of no better way to expand each of your organization's reach than through a sound peer-to-peer / crowdfunding strategy. And when properly implemented, a peer-to-peer fundraising strategy truly creates that amplifying effect in terms of organizational efficiency. Being able to leverage and empower your own supporters to tap into their networks of friends and family can be very powerful. I constantly hear from organizations that they're always feeling this pressure that they need to increase fundraising and revenue, but still keep costs low. I'm sure there's many on this call that feel that same way. And You know, the old adage that many of you may have heard is, would you rather have 1,000 $1 donors or a $1,000 donor? It's much better to build capacity with 1,000 people versus being overly dependent upon one. Because each of those 1,000 people are going to bring their own network, their own ideas and expertise, creating much broader wealth for your organization. So let's take a look at some key findings that we learned based on our 2013 peer-to-peer benchmark study. And before we get into that, I want to define what is that benchmark study. Essentially, it's an analysis of peer-to-peer fundraising data that documents some common statistics that can be used to determine peer-to-peer event health compared to other peer-to-peer events in the industry. And since Blackbaud's TeamRaiser product processes well over $1 billion annually from peer-to-peer fundraising, we're able to gain tremendous insights from the breadth of that data. And we mined this data from a sample set of 1,275 organizations, which represent a mind-boggling 28,000 different events. So material sample size. And the first key finding, as you can see on this chart, is that participants are multi-channel communicators. We come to this conclusion because in the report, we saw double-digit growth in both registration numbers and funds raised, which tells us that events are growing the same time that email rates are declining. So this is a clear indicator that participants are spreading the word outside the context of sending emails directly from the participant center. It's an easy jump to make that this decline represents two prominent industry trends that Mike kind of hit on earlier. The first is the increased adoption of mobile applications to support event fundraising. Think about it. Emails sent via a mobile application, they're not tracked through the tools that we're able to assess through this benchmark report. And second, the expansive use of social media. The expansion of social media is probably not a huge surprise to anybody on this call. Social media channels like Facebook and Twitter are displacing email as a primary means of communication for many people. I actually saw Sunday in the news report that Twitter, surprisingly, passed Facebook as the most popular social media outlet among teens here in the U.S. And I would be interested to see if Canada is the same as well. In the context of peer-to-peer, this can be very powerful because I think two of Canadian Cancer's top fundraisers a few years ago happened to be millennials. Amazing. So this means you really need to be strategic about how your event is incorporating social media into your overall event experience. The next slide, ensuring that positive experience for your supporters is paramount. So according to research conducted by Charity Dynamics, a third-party consulting firm, approximately 40% of would-be event participants abandon the process before the end of the first registration step. The impact that can have on an organization's bottom line can be quite significant. So what can we do to ensure we are providing our participants with a positive user experience? Well, first, to Mike's point, mobile experiences, they're becoming the norm rather than the exception. Participants are expecting organizations to provide mobile-friendly websites, especially when it comes to registration and donation forms. Some of you may have recalled Mike had said the concept of responsive design. This is a very important concept. It essentially means that your constituents can consume content without all that tedious, scrolling and using the thumb and forefinger to minimize, regardless of what type their device they're using, whether it's a BlackBerry, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, Galaxy, whatever they're using. So in regards to the social media trend, providing tools like social sharing really help make it easier for the participants to spread the word. The best part about this trend is that we know from previous research that multi-channel fundraisers outperform their peers by more than 40%. In Blackbaud's peer-to-peer survey that we published this last year, we actually found participants who leverage Twitter raise on average 10 times more than those who do not. Encouraging and promoting channel diversification is going to provide a better experience for your participants and help you increase the bottom line. On this next slide, we just discussed the revenue implications of providing that positive user experience, but another key finding from the report is that returning participants raise significantly more than first-year participants. This is true across all types of events. You can see here by the numbers that the funds raised per participant can be anywhere from 2 to 6 times higher in their second year, depending upon the type of event. The next slide. So the question I pose back to you is, what is your strategy to ensure that your participants come back the following year, considering the revenue implications of returning participants? Many times I hear organizations struggle with 50, 60, 70% attrition rates and having to backfill those people. Keeping in touch with your participants year-round is key. You want to make sure you keep the organization and its mission top of mind, and providing recognition of your participants' success and really show that extra level of appreciation. You know, some things that I hear is that offer early bird registrations as well to encourage participants to start fundraising for the next year as opposed to waiting. Last and most important, ensure you're making that overall experience easy for them, whether that means ensuring your site is accessible on their mobile devices, or the registration process is simple and optimized, or that maybe you're maintaining their year-over-year information, allowing to see who gave to them in their prior year. Those are their warm leads. All of these types of tactics are going to help retain them and allow them to be more successful in the subsequent years. The next slide, another key finding that we continue to see is third-party fundraising becoming more and more prevalent. Third-party fundraising, in essence, enables the constituent to create their own events and then fundraise on behalf of your organization. This style of fundraising is growing in popularity with both organizations and organizational supporters because it gives the fundraisers the flexibility to raise money on their own terms. And looking at this slide, we can actually see some interesting stats that we learned from this about third-party fundraisers. First, they're highly engaged fundraisers. And we say this because when compared to their peers participating in the traditional run, walk, ride style events, a larger percent of these participants are actually fundraising. These participants tend to raise more than their run, walk, ride counterparts, and when they ask for gifts, their donors are more generous. Interestingly, the retention rates for these type of fundraisers is lower than their peers participating in the traditional run, walk, ride style events. Why? Well, the answer is pretty simple. These participants are more loyal to your organization's mission than they are to any specific event. For these supporters, the event, be that participation in a marathon or perhaps hosting a house party, it's just simply a means to justify and build excitement around their fundraising initiatives. Once the event is completed, participants in third-party fundraising campaigns, they are ideal candidates to engage in other areas of your organization. So let's take a look at some of the trends, the next slide, that we're seeing in the marketplace in Canada. Slide 17, the next one. Social fundraising is the same concept of third-party fundraising. I want to call this out because as an organization, and you can add click it again to get to build out the graphics here, but an organization recruiting individuals that then use their different means of communication to recruit their friends and family to make a donation back to the org. I wanted to call this out because many of you may have heard of social fundraising and might think it is really being limited to social media. And I want to make that sure that if that's very clear that social media is just one form of what our supporters are using to communicate with one another. They may use email, they may be speaking to one another. The great thing about social, aka third-party fundraising, is the fact that it removes that burden of putting on logistics around a traditional event and places that squarely on the shoulders of the constituent. It also, to the point made earlier, really enabling your supporters to define how they engage with your organization. So next slide, let's take a look at some of the trends that we're seeing right now in the marketplace, specifically around social fundraising. The first trend we are running into is that orgs that have traditionally done offline third-party fundraising activities are now expanding those activities to include online tools. The example here is from Care Canada. Here you can see your own fundraising event by going to their website and signing up. traditional offline events like auctions or dinner parties, they now have this virtual element tied to them. Care Canada is essentially taking a traditional offline concept and expanding upon it, allowing people to go online and recruit friends and family that they know and who care about the important issues that Care Canada is fighting for. The next slide and next trend we are seeing in the marketplace is around social fundraising campaigns that are limited to the online space alone. The example we're looking at here is from Canadian Cancer Society. You'll see that they've set up giving pages. And this campaign allows people to set up fundraising campaigns in honor or in memory of someone who may have gone through cancer treatment. Another clear example of how an organization is extending the reach of their own base by allowing those folks to set up online campaigns where they can reach out to their friends and family, giving Canadian Cancer supporters the proper tools to be effective. For the folks that may be in hospital foundations or hospitals on this call, this type of tactic really is grateful patient fundraising, also known as that, and very popular and very compelling. The next slide here, and third trend I wanted to point out, is the increased adoption of charity programs in conjunction with traditional athletic events. Here, MS Canada, Multiple Sclerosis Canada, through their Do-It-Yourself campaign, is enabling supporters to piggyback off of traditional athletic events not affiliated with the organization directly. So this is another cool opportunity where we're seeing organizations expand their footprint when they are absolutely not doing any of the logistical planning around the event inside the walls of their organization. So next slide, we talked about some of the trends that are taking place. I think it's also important to think about what is driving these trends. What is driving the conversation around social fundraising, and what is driving the idea to do constituent-driven fundraising outside the walls of your org? Well, it's simple. We're feeling pressure from both the top organizational leadership as well as the fundraisers themselves. In regards to the leadership, there's always this increased competition for donor dollars as well as that pressure to grow fundraising in an extremely competitive marketplace. There's this need to diversify the fundraising efforts. What I mean by that is to have more than one type of fundraising campaign that is bringing money into your org. Social fundraising meets some of this criteria set above. Low cost to set up, low cost to maintain, and it gives you that additional revenue stream to increase the fundraising efforts of your org. As it pertains to the fundraisers associated with your org, there's a certain bit of event fundraising fatigue going on in our space. There's a ton of events in Austin where I live that I could be partake in. And people are just looking to do things a bit different than they may have done in the past. So social fundraising is important because you're meeting the demands of your fundraisers, providing them with highly flexible, inherently social tools that can be easily acceptable and happen to be alternatives to the traditional run, walk, ride style events that are in the market, a type of fundraising that really puts them in the driver's seat. And so in the next slide, in the remaining time, let's take a look at some real-world examples. The next slide is a small organization in Canada called WaterCan. Their mission is to bring healthy, clean water to cities, small cities in Africa, and their campaign is called Donate Your Special Day. These guys don't do a traditional run, walk, ride style event. They leverage this concept of third-party fundraising where the sky is the limit. Here you can see participants can donate their birthday, a holiday. Maybe you're organizing your own run or walk. And what I really like is how they've tapped into and parlayed the leverage the workplace. You know, the idea of setting up a team within your company to fundraise on behalf of WaterCan is absolutely brilliant. The next example I love.
Well, I just wanted to say, you could say, so life changers, for example. So if you're getting divorced, then raise some money. So I think they're thinking, how do you fit into every single part of your life, giving to the organization you love? Just hand it back.
Exactly. Great point. It doesn't have to be a wedding. It could be if you're getting a divorce. I mean, it applies to everybody. Every constituent want to interact their own way. The other example is from Alzheimer's, and this is really cool because this is called The Longest Day. And one of the things I love about this is it was built out of the idea that the caregivers who take care of people with Alzheimer's, every day is their longest day. My grandmother fought this with my grandfather, and every day was her longest day. So are you willing to give out the longest day of your year, which happens to be June 21st, to help raise money in support of those folks whose longest day is every day of their lives? So really what they're doing is developing the concept of this campaign that they had, they really had their constituents at the heart of everything. They were really trying hard to engage those folks that were touched by Alzheimer's in these types of fundraising activities. And if you look at the next slide, we did an interview with them, and this is the last slide in terms of, what were some of the insights they had to help us get started. And in that interview, they told us what process they went through when they were building out the longest day, and any suggestions they may have for organizations such as yourself considering this type of fundraising. The first recommendation is really brainstorm opportunities. Think about what types of fundraising activities fit well within your mission. And once you've gone through that brainstorming session, start to map out a plan of attack. Consider running a small pilot with a select few organizations and see if it works. See if you're providing the right tools. Meanwhile, think through how are you going to budget this? How are you going to staff and support this? What types of marketing and communication plans has to be in place before rolling out the campaign to ensure it's successful? All too often I see orgs invest a lot of time putting up a website to do a social fundraising campaign, but they don't have a communication plan around it. You need to be putting up a website and then promoting that website and the activities around that website. Next, make sure that when you're developing your campaign, you're heavily tying it to your mission and org. And it's common that people are participating in social fundraising campaigns, but they just kind of pick the organization that meets their mission. They may not have a tie specifically to your organization. And since there's increased competition for multiple orgs that may be supporting the same mission, you want to make sure that your mission is heavily inserted into all the touch points along the way. The entire participant experience, from the registration look and feel to the communication they receive before, during, and after their engagement with you. And making sure that the supporter becomes a supporter for life and not just a supporter because you happen to have the website tools that they're looking for when they wanted to support prostate cancer or breast cancer or whatever it is. Next, have a home base for all of your tools and interactions, and have a presence in preferred social media outlets like Facebook and Twitter, and bring all of those things together in a single website landing page that really talks about the event, why you're doing it, and encourage more people to get engaged. And the last point, obviously, is stay constituent focused. Solicit feedback from those that participated in the event, and most importantly, acknowledge the ones that have been very successful for you. So I want to kick it back over to Mike on our final slide here as we close this out.
Great. So let's just quickly touch on the conversation over the last hour. Be mobile. We looked at the next-gen findings, especially for younger age subsets, both currently and, more important, next-gen telling us how important and vital and key mobile is going to be over the next few years for Gen X and Gen Y donors. So think about ways that you can create responsive possibilities and responsive design and a responsive experience in mobile. And don't forget tablets as well in the conversation. But I think when we think about finding the right way for crowdfunding, I love Ken's point about brainstorming. I think as it relates to social network fundraising and the trends that Ken showed, and tying and linking that to the demands of Gen X and Gen Y around crowdfunding, we know that NextGen told us that Gen X and Gen Y find transparency, directed giving, and showing impact as terribly important in their giving, and that ties to the experience non-charitably of crowdfunding that they're doing. How do we take those ideas of transparency and directedness and put them into best practice in the charitable side with trends that Ken talked about? And I think brainstorming in your organization for the opportunity is perfect. Be social. It's a reminder that mobile and crowdfunding and social are inextricably linked for Gen X and Gen Y most especially. And then last, just a reminder from Ken and a reminder from me that an integrated plan takes the things we're talking about today and takes them and connects them in a plan to the traditional ways that you've been engaging. So they go hand in hand, and the Next Gen report shows that completely. And so as a reminder about that report, make sure if you haven't downloaded or looked at, go and see the funky animated graphics that we've created, but more important, get the meat of the report in a download through that infographic. Take the slides that we have presented today in the conversation. You'll get them in the next day or two, and go back to your shops and think how mobile and mobile responsiveness and crowdfunding and social all mix together and make you more effective for the trends that Ken was showing, where people want to do more, but they want more control and they want a better experience like the one they're getting in the commercial world. So we have to catch up and do a better job. So just to end things off and take a few questions, remember to fill out the survey, give Ken and I some feedback, and someone's going to get a chance to spend an hour with us and maybe work on responsive possibilities in your organization or a crowdfunding idea. And with that, thank you, and we'll take a few questions if people have them. So we do have a good question. How are crowdfunding donations receipted? Do receipts and charitable donation tax credits matter in this space? I think the matter in this space, we have to remind ourselves that a minority of adults who make charitable donations today that are officially receipted even use those receipts in all areas of fundraising according to CRA. So that's a good reminder. But there is a charitable tax receipt that's equal to the amount. So let's say you're using a Canadian portal like GiveEffect. You will get a tax receipt. If there is a tangible reward of value, then the value of that will reduce the tax receipt that you get. So for the most part, the same principles are at play. So I'm just looking here. There's another question. Someone has mixed feelings about whether or not to try and engage and develop relationships with friends of the participants. The only thing that I would say is there are organizations like Alberta Cancer Foundation who have a very sensitive customer relationship plan for donors of participants, and they've been able to convert, wait for it, 15,000, I think in the next year they would have converted 15,000 donors of people's personal pages to monthly giving. So I think if you're sensitive in converting those donors in the right way, then you can get deeper engagement from those people.
And this is Ken. This is a great question, and just adding on color commentary to Mike's point, I think a lot of organizations, the majority of them, feel that this is violates the trust of their supporters because these are the friends of their supporters. And I think, yes, you don't want to ask these friends of their supporters immediately up for an ask, but perhaps doing it in a softer way. And what I see our clients doing is leveraging kind of a track or multi-touch email campaign or communication track that surveys them. How are you affiliated with the organization? What are your interests? Do you care about being a volunteer for us? And just kind of soften that up and cultivate them and steward them, because these are prime prospects, people that tend to have an affinity or share similar values as their friends are going to likely share similar values with the organization. So the short answer is, yes, you don't want to immediately put them into your general communication flow and ask them up for a donation, but be very tactful and be very thoughtful about how you're going to cultivate them in a softer way to begin to build that relationship, because that's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. Another good question. We know that securing major gifts is crucial to keeping down fundraising costs. The suggestions here seem to focus on smaller gifts. How do we focus on engaging Gen X and Gen Y and giving larger gifts? So a few points here. I think we do need to remember that major gifts do not happen in a predictable and sustainable way without a foundation of smaller gifts. So I think in the Canadian context, We do not build and invest in excellent annual campaigns that are the true pipeline to major gifts. So major gifts do not just appear. Major gifts come from people who have made smaller gifts over time. But Gen X and Gen Y, one example is from the Hospital for Sick Children here in Toronto. When we did some survey work of their monthly donors, Gen X donors were interested in giving gifts of stock. So entering into middle donor gift area after being monthly donors, and that Gen X group were affluent and well connected, and gifts of stock were more attractive. So and LinkedIn was an important part of that. So here we see the intersection of LinkedIn as a kind of marketing conduit to Gen X donors being asked to think of giving gifts of stock as their first entry point to middle donor-dom or larger gifts. So I hope that answers it, but I think the reminder is we don't secure major gifts from anyone but, for the most part, Gen X, Gen Y, boomers, and matures who have been making small gifts for a number of years.
And just on top of that, I think this is an excellent tactic to acquire and bring in those younger demographics to start solidifying and building those lifetime relationships with them over time to when they would have the financial capacity to become major donors.
That's
right.
Right.
Younger donors tend to be a lot less loyal, so the sooner you can get in and start building those relationships where many organizations are not, they're focusing on the cash cow, the older demographic, and not doing an effective job with the younger ones, the sooner you can get in and engage those younger ones and start to cultivate them and develop relationships, the more likely they're going to stay with your organization long term.
Excellent. Seeing no further questions, though you may have some and you can email us, I'd like to thank everyone. We'll end a minute or two early. People have busy lives. They have to get back to work and apply all of the things we talked about today. So thanks so much for listening in and participating in the webinar. Ken, thanks for being a part of this. And we'll send out this material soon, and we hope it's helpful. And make sure you get the Next Gen report and blow our minds with mobile responsive and crowdfunding ideas over the next year. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.